They say love can bloom in the most unexpected places. For me, it happened when I was taken hostage by the most dangerous woman alive. Sounds unbelievable, right? But that's exactly what happened to me. My name is your name and this is my story, a tale of danger, defiance, and an unshakable connection that changed everything I thought I knew about love. It's not just a story about survival, it's about how two people from completely different worlds found each other in the chaos. When I first met her, she wasn't just any criminal mastermind. She was the Mafia queen, feared, untouchable, and shrouded in mystery. To the outside world, she was cold and calculating, someone who ruled with an iron fist. But behind closed doors, there was another side to her, a side that no one else had ever seen before. And somehow, against all odds, she let me see it. But here's the thing, this isn't just a story about romance. It's also about power, trust, and redemption. You'll learn how someone so feared could have such a vulnerable soul, and how even in the darkest moments, humanity has a way of shining through. By the end of this video, you'll understand why love doesn't always follow the rules we set for it. So why should you stick around until the very last word? Because this isn't your typical love story. This is raw, real, and filled with twists you won't see coming. Trust me, once you hear how it all unfolded, you'll never look at relationships, or the concept of love, the same way again. Before we dive into the heart-stopping details, I want to thank you for being here. If you're new to our channel, welcome. We share gripping stories like this one every week, so make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Now, buckle up, because this journey starts now, and trust me, you won't want to look away. Before everything changed, my life was simple, almost painfully ordinary. I lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, where mornings started with the smell of coffee brewing and evenings ended with books and soft music. My days were predictable: work at the local library, grab dinner from the cafe down the street, and spend hours lost in novels that let me escape into worlds far more exciting than mine. Life wasn't perfect, but it was safe, comfortable, predictable. I had dreams, though they weren't anything extraordinary. Maybe one day I'd travel, to see the canals of Venice or walk along the beaches of Santorini. Or maybe I'd finally finish writing that novel I always talked about but never started. Back then, my biggest worry was whether I'd make rent on time or if the bookstore would get the new release I'd been waiting for weeks to read. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. How sheltered. At the time, I thought danger only existed in movies or news headlines. It felt distant, like something that happened to other people, not to someone like me. But even in my quiet little corner of the world, there were whispers. Rumors that trickled through the cracks of everyday conversations. People spoke in hushed tones about her, the woman who ran the underground empire everyone pretended didn't exist. The Mafia queen. They said she was ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. Some claimed she could crush your life with a snap of her fingers, others swore she had eyes everywhere, watching, waiting. No one knew her real name, or at least, no one dared to say it out loud. She was less of a person and more of a shadow, lurking just beyond the edges of normalcy. To be honest, I didn't pay much attention to the stories at first. They seemed exaggerated, like urban legends meant to scare kids straight. But the more I heard them, the harder it became to ignore. There was something chilling about the way people said her title, not as a name, but as a warning. A reminder that some forces were beyond our control. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. Whatever world she lived in, it had nothing to do with me. Little did I know, those whispers would soon become my reality. It happened on a night that started like any other. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain from earlier in the day. I remember walking home from the library, my arms full of books, humming softly to myself. The streets were quiet, too quiet, though I didn't notice it at the time. That's how they caught me off guard. One moment, I was stepping around a puddle near the alleyway shortcut I always took. The next, a black van screeched to a halt beside me. Before I could even scream, rough hands grabbed me from behind, pulling me backward with terrifying strength. My books tumbled to the ground, their pages fluttering uselessly in the wind as if protesting the chaos unfolding around them. A sharp sting burned across my mouth, a rag soaked in something bitter and chemical, and then everything went blurry. Panic surged through me, electric and suffocating. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. Adrenaline screamed through my veins, but no matter how much I struggled, I couldn't break free. When I woke up, I wasn't sure where I was, or what had happened. The room was dimly lit, the kind of lighting that made shadows stretch unnaturally long across the walls. There was a metallic tang in the air, sharp and unsettling, and the faint hum of distant voices somewhere beyond the door. My head throbbed, and every muscle in my body ached from the struggle. Fear clawed at my throat, raw and primal. And then she walked in. She didn't knock or announce herself. She simply appeared, as if materializing out of thin air. Her presence filled the room instantly, commanding and unyielding. She moved with purpose, each step deliberate, her heels clicking against the cold floor like a countdown to something inevitable. Her voice struck first, low, smooth, and razor-sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You're awake," she said, not as a question but as a statement of fact. It wasn't just her tone that demanded attention, it was the weight behind it, the authority that left no room for argument. I couldn't see her face clearly, it was shrouded in shadow, but I didn't need to. Her silhouette was enough, tall, poised, exuding power like it was second nature. She wore a tailored suit that hugged her frame perfectly, giving her an almost regal appearance despite the circumstances. Every detail about her screamed control, from the way she carried herself to the glint of determination in her eyes. But there was something else too, something darker lurking beneath the surface. Danger radiated off her in waves, tangible and suffocating. My instinct was pure defiance. I spat at her feet, not because I thought it would do anything, but because I refused to let her see how terrified I was. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to steady it. "What do you want from me?" She tilted her head slightly, studying me like I was a puzzle she hadn't quite solved yet. For a split second, I thought I saw curiosity flicker in her expression, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "You'll learn soon enough," she replied, her words calm yet laced with menace. "But for now, understand this, your life belongs to me." The finality in her voice hit me like a punch to the gut. Anger flared inside me, hot and desperate. "You can't keep me here," I shot back, though even as I said it, doubt crept into my mind. Could she? Would she? Her laugh was low and chilling, sending shivers down my spine. "We'll see," she said simply before turning on her heel and walking away, leaving me alone with nothing but the sound of her retreating footsteps echoing in my ears. For hours, maybe days, I lost track of time. I sat there, replaying those moments over and over in my head. Each memory twisted tighter around me, binding me in fear and uncertainty. This was it, I thought. This was how my story ended. But it turned out to be only the beginning. Life in captivity wasn't what I expected. At first, I thought every day would be a nightmare, a relentless cycle of cruelty and despair. But the reality was far more complicated. She didn't treat me like a prisoner in the traditional sense. There were no chains, no locked doors, though I quickly learned there was nowhere to run. Instead, her control over me was subtler, woven into the fabric of our strange coexistence. Her presence was constant, looming over everything I did. Meals appeared without explanation, simple but filling dishes that hinted at some level of care, though I refused to acknowledge it at first. She never joined me for these meals. Instead, she observed silently from across the room, her sharp gaze dissecting my every move. Her silence unnerved me more than anything else. It was as if she were always thinking, always calculating, even when she seemed idle. At times, she was indifferent, treating me like an inconvenience rather than a person. Other times, her actions bordered on protective. Once, when one of her henchmen raised his voice at me during a heated argument, she stepped in immediately, her tone icier than I'd ever heard it. "Leave her alone," she commanded, her words slicing through the tension like a knife. The man backed off instantly, leaving me shaken but unharmed. That moment stuck with me, not because of the threat itself, but because of the way she looked at me afterward. For just a second, something flickered in her expression, something softer, before she turned away and resumed her usual stoic demeanor. But make no mistake, she wasn't kind out of compassion. This wasn't charity, this was possession. Every gesture, every word, reinforced the fact that I belonged to her now. And yet, there were moments when her humanity slipped through the cracks. Late at night, when the house fell silent except for the faint creak of floorboards, I'd hear her pacing outside my door. Sometimes, she'd stop and linger, as if debating whether to come in. Once, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the door slightly, catching a glimpse of her standing there, lost in thought. She looked different, vulnerable, almost. When she noticed me watching, she straightened up immediately, her mask snapping back into place. Go back inside, she ordered, her voice clipped. But for those few seconds, I saw someone else beneath the armor, the woman behind the title. My feelings toward her were a tangled mess. Hate came easily at first. How could it not? She had taken everything from me, my freedom, my safety, my peace of mind. Yet, as days turned into weeks, fear gave way to something murkier. Anger still simmered beneath the surface, but it was tempered by confusion. Why did she spare me when others wouldn't have hesitated to hurt me? Why did she insist on keeping me close, even when it clearly complicated things for her? The turning point came during a stormy night. Thunder rattled the windows, and lightning illuminated the room in jagged bursts. I couldn't sleep, my nerves frayed by the deafening crashes outside. Then, unexpectedly, she appeared at my doorway. Without a word, she handed me a blanket and sat down on the edge of the bed, staring out the window. For once, she wasn't commanding or intimidating, just there. Are you afraid? She asked after a long stretch of silence. Her voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. No, I lied, clutching the blanket tighter around myself. She smirked faintly, glancing at me sideways. You're a terrible liar. For reasons I couldn't explain, her comment made me laugh, a short, nervous sound that surprised us both. She didn't join in, but the corner of her mouth twitched upward, and for a brief moment the tension between us eased. We sat there together until the storm passed, neither of us speaking. It was the first time I realized she wasn't entirely heartless, and that realization terrified me. After that night, I began to notice little things about her. The way she paused mid-sentence when choosing her words carefully. The faint crease between her brows when she was deep in thought. The rare occasions when her guard dropped, revealing glimpses of the woman underneath. Each detail chipped away at the wall I'd built around her image in my mind. I hated myself for noticing it, but there was something magnetic about her. Something that drew me in despite every instinct screaming to stay away. It started subtly, a fleeting comment here, a guarded expression there. Over time, the cracks in her armor began to show, revealing fragments of the woman she tried so desperately to bury beneath layers of power and control. The more I pieced together, the clearer it became that her life hadn't always been this way. There was pain behind her cold exterior, pain that ran deeper than I could have imagined. One evening, after weeks, or maybe months, of living under her shadow, she walked into the room with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. She set them down on the table without explanation, her movements deliberate but unhurried. For a moment, I thought she might ignore me entirely. Instead, she poured the wine and handed me a glass, her eyes avoiding mine. Drink, she said simply, though her tone lacked its usual sharpness. I hesitated, unsure of what to make of this sudden shift. Was this some kind of test? A trap? But when our fingers brushed as she passed me the glass, I felt something unexpected, a tremor, brief and almost imperceptible. It wasn't fear or anger, it was vulnerability. That realization froze me in place, forcing me to look at her differently. She sat across from me, swirling the wine in her glass absently. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where the last light of dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. For once, she didn't seem like the untouchable Mafia queen. She looked human, fragile, even. I wasn't always like this, she said abruptly, breaking the silence. Her voice was low, tinged with something I couldn't quite place, regret, perhaps, or resignation. I stared at her, caught off guard by the admission. Like what? I asked cautiously, bracing myself for whatever came next. She exhaled slowly, as if gathering her thoughts. This hardened shell you see now. This, life. She gestured vaguely around the room, encompassing not just the space but everything it represented, the power, the danger, the isolation. It wasn't my choice. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. I wanted to press her further, to demand answers, but something held me back. Instead, I waited, letting her take the lead. My father was the head of one of the largest families in the city, she continued after a long pause. When I was young, he groomed me to take over his empire. He called it preparation, I called it suffocation. Her lips twisted into a bitter smile. But I played along because what else could I do? I was his daughter, his heir. Refusing him would have meant death, for me and everyone I cared about. Her confession stunned me. Until that moment, I'd assumed she thrived on the chaos, that she reveled in the power she wielded. But hearing her talk about her past, about the weight of expectations crushing her before she'd even had a chance to live, changed everything. There was a man, she added softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone who saw through the mask I wore. Someone who made me believe I could escape this life. We planned to leave together, to start over somewhere far away from all of this. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass, knuckles whitening. But someone betrayed us. My father found out, and, she trailed off, swallowing hard. I didn't need her to finish the sentence. The grief in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Whoever he had been, he was gone now, and his loss had left a void inside her that nothing could fill. That's why you're the way you are, I murmured, more to myself than to her. She nodded stiffly, her jaw clenched. After that, I stopped caring about anything but survival. Love is a luxury I can't afford. Trust is a weakness I can't afford. Everything I've done since then has been to protect myself, and those who depend on me, from making the same mistakes again. As she spoke, I saw glimpses of the person she used to be, the girl who dreamed of freedom, the woman who dared to love despite the risks. And I realized how much of herself she'd sacrificed to survive in a world that demanded nothing less than absolute ruthlessness. That night, we didn't say much else. She finished her wine in silence, her shoulders tense as if bracing against an invisible storm. When she finally stood to leave, she paused at the doorway, glancing back at me. "Don't pity me," she warned, her voice sharp once more. "This is who I am now. Don't forget that." But it was too late. Something inside me had shifted. Listening to her story, seeing the pain she carried so silently, forced me to confront the truth. She wasn't just my captor anymore. She had become something else entirely. The chemistry between us wasn't something that happened overnight. It crept up slowly, like the first light of dawn breaking through a dark sky, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore once it took hold. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than proximity or Stockholm Syndrome. After all, how could I possibly feel anything for the woman who had taken everything from me? But no matter how hard I fought against it, the connection grew stronger with each passing day. It started with small things, gestures and moments so fleeting they could almost be dismissed as coincidence. The way her hand lingered on my shoulder just a fraction longer than necessary when guiding me through a doorway. The way her gaze would catch mine across the room, lingering just long enough to make my pulse quicken before she looked away. There were nights when I caught her watching me, her expression unreadable but intense, as if she were trying to decipher some hidden truth about me. And then there were the times when our fingers brushed accidentally, a touch brief yet electric, leaving behind a warmth that refused to fade. But it wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. Conversations that began as terse exchanges evolved into something deeper, more intimate. She still commanded respect and obedience, but there were moments when her guard slipped, revealing glimpses of vulnerability. Once, during one of those rare late-night talks, she admitted, "You're different from anyone else I've ever met." Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as though admitting such a thing made her uncomfortable. "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Most people either fear me or try to manipulate me. You don't do either." "Not entirely, anyway." Her honesty caught me off guard, stirring emotions I didn't want to examine too closely. How could I reconcile the person sitting in front of me, the woman sharing pieces of herself, with the image of the ruthless mafia queen I'd built in my mind? The conflict tore at me, pulling me in two directions at once. On one hand, I hated her for what she'd done to me, for stealing my freedom, for forcing me into this life. On the other hand, I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward her, the magnetic force that drew me closer despite every rational instinct telling me to stay away. The tension reached its peak during an argument that spiraled out of control. It started innocuously enough, a disagreement over something trivial, like whether I should accompany her to a meeting outside the house. "I'm not your prisoner anymore," I snapped, crossing my arms defiantly. "Stop treating me like one." Her eyes narrowed dangerously, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out. "You think this is easy for me?" She shot back, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea what's at stake here? What happens if someone finds out about you?" "That's not my problem," I retorted, my anger bubbling over. "You dragged me into this mess, you don't get to decide what risks I take." We stood inches apart, both of us breathing heavily, the air thick with unspoken emotion. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, without warning, she closed the distance between us, her lips crashing against mine in a kiss that was equal parts fury and desperation. My body reacted before my mind could process what was happening, responding to the intensity of her touch even as guilt and confusion warred within me. When she finally pulled away, her chest heaving, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, equal parts hunger and regret. "This changes nothing," she said hoarsely, stepping back as if trying to put space between us. But it did change everything. That kiss shattered whatever fragile boundaries we'd managed to maintain until that point. It forced me to confront the truth I'd been avoiding. I was falling for her. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't help myself. Every glance, every touch, every word exchanged carried a weight that went beyond captivity. It was attraction, raw and undeniable. And yet, the taboo nature of my feelings gnawed at me constantly. How could I justify loving someone who held me captive? Someone whose actions had destroyed countless lives? Was I betraying myself by allowing these emotions to take root? Or was I simply human, unable to resist the pull of something greater than logic? I wrestled with these questions endlessly, seeking answers that never came. Part of me clung to the hope that things could be different, that maybe, just maybe, she could leave her old life behind and start anew. But another part of me knew better. This world wasn't something you walked away from easily. Even if she wanted to, the consequences would be devastating. Every time I looked at her, I felt torn between my past and this strange new future, a future where lines blurred and loyalties shifted in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. Just when I thought I was beginning to understand the fragile balance of our strange relationship, everything changed. The betrayal came from someone I least expected, someone close to me, someone who claimed they were trying to help. It started with a note slipped under my door late one night, written in hurried handwriting, "We know where you are. We're coming for you." Asterisk. At first, I didn't know what to think. Was this real, or some kind of trap? My heart raced as I read the words over and over again, torn between hope and fear. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out, a chance to reclaim the life I'd lost. Fear that trusting this message could put me, and her, in even greater danger. When she found out, it wasn't pretty. She stormed into the room, holding the crumpled note in her hand, her eyes blazing with fury. "Who sent this?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I don't know," I stammered, backing away instinctively. I woke up and it was just there. For a moment, she stared at me, searching my face for any sign of deception. Then, without warning, she slammed her fist against the wall, making me flinch. "Do you realize what this means?" She spat, her tone laced with venom. "If they find you, if anyone finds out about us, it's over. For both of us." Her reaction sent a chill down my spine. For the first time since I'd been taken, I saw real fear in her eyes, not for herself but for me. That terrified me more than anything else. Because if she was scared, then whatever was coming must be far worse than anything I'd imagined. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and paranoia. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. She doubled security around the house, barking orders at her men with an intensity that left no room for error. But despite her outward focus on protection, I noticed something different about her behavior toward me. She watched me more closely, almost obsessively, as if afraid I might disappear at any moment. Then, one night, it happened. A group of armed men broke into the house, their faces masked and their intentions clear. They weren't here to negotiate, they were here to kill. Chaos erupted instantly, gunfire echoing through the halls as her men scrambled to defend the property. I crouched behind a piece of furniture, frozen in terror, unable to move or think. And then she appeared, grabbing me by the arm and pulling me to my feet. "Come with me," she shouted above the noise, dragging me toward a hidden exit I hadn't known existed. Her grip was firm but not painful, her movements urgent yet controlled. As we ran, I heard one of the intruders call out, "She's getting away with the hostage. Stop them." Without hesitation, she shoved me ahead of her and turned back to face our pursuers, drawing her gun with practiced ease. "Go," she yelled, her voice leaving no room for argument. "No," I screamed, refusing to leave her behind. "This isn't up for debate," she snapped, her expression fierce. "Get out of here, now." Tears streamed down my face as I obeyed, knowing deep down that she was sacrificing herself for me. Each step felt like a betrayal, even though I knew staying would only make things worse. When I finally reached safety, hiding in the woods outside the compound, I collapsed to my knees, sobbing uncontrollably. How could I live with myself if she died because of me? But she didn't die. Hours later, battered and bleeding but alive, she returned to where I waited. Her suit was torn, her face smudged with dirt and blood, but her eyes burned with determination. "Are you hurt?" she asked immediately, scanning me for injuries. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "But you I'm fine, she interrupted, dismissing her wounds with a wave of her hand. Then, softer, you're safe. That's all that matters. In that moment, something inside me shifted. This wasn't the same woman who had kidnapped me months ago, the ruthless mafia queen who ruled with an iron fist. This was someone willing to risk everything, not for power, not for control, but for me. Her actions spoke louder than any words ever could. She had proven her loyalty, her love, in ways I couldn't ignore. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized how much I'd grown since the day I was taken. I wasn't the same person anymore. Neither was she. In saving me, she had saved herself, from the darkness that had consumed her for so long. And in letting her in, truly letting her in, I had found a love I never imagined possible. It wasn't perfect, and it probably never would be. But sometimes, love doesn't need perfection. Sometimes, it just needs two people willing to fight for each other, no matter the cost. Leaving the mafia world behind wasn't easy, for either of us. It required sacrifices neither of us could have anticipated, and risks that still kept me awake at night. But somehow, against all odds, we made it out. Together. We didn't go far, at least not right away. The first few months were spent in a small, secluded cabin tucked deep in the woods, miles away from anyone who might recognize her or ask questions about our past. It was quiet there, peaceful in a way neither of us had ever experienced before. No gunshots echoing through the halls. No midnight meetings filled with threats and schemes. Just the sound of wind rustling through trees and the occasional crackle of a fire in the hearth. For the first time, we had space to breathe, to truly be ourselves without fear of judgment or consequence. At first, adjusting to this new life felt strange, almost surreal. She was no longer the untouchable mafia queen, she was just, her. A woman learning how to live without power or control dictating every move she made. And I was no longer a hostage or an outsider looking in. I was someone she trusted completely, someone she leaned on when the weight of everything became too much. Our bond grew stronger with each passing day, forged not just by shared trauma but by the deliberate choice to face the future together. We talked endlessly, about everything and nothing. About the lives we'd left behind, the scars we carried, and the dreams we hoped to build. There were moments when old habits surfaced, when her instinct to command clashed with my need for independence. But instead of letting those differences drive us apart, we used them to understand each other better. She taught me resilience, while I reminded her of the beauty in vulnerability. Together, we created something neither of us could have built alone. What makes our love unique isn't just its origin, it's the way it defied logic. How could two people from such opposing worlds find common ground, let alone fall in love? Yet here we are, proof that connection can blossom even in the most unlikely places. Our relationship isn't perfect, we argue, we stumble, we doubt. But what keeps us going is the unwavering belief that we're stronger together than we ever were apart. Now, years later, we've built a life neither of us thought possible. A cozy home filled with laughter and light. Jobs that fulfill us without endangering others. Friends who accept us for who we are, not who we once were. Some days, I look at her across the breakfast table and marvel at how far we've come. The woman sitting there, smiling softly as sunlight streams through the window, isn't the same one who once held me captive. And yet, in so many ways, she is. Because beneath the layers of power and pain, she's always been the person I see now, fierce, loyal, and deeply loving. To anyone watching this story unfold, know this, love doesn't follow rules. It doesn't care about timing or circumstance. Sometimes, it shows up when you least expect it, in the middle of chaos, wrapped in danger, hidden beneath layers of mistrust. But if you're brave enough to fight for it, if you're willing to take the risk, it can transform your life in ways you never imagined. They say love finds you when you least expect it. For us, it came wrapped in danger, but it was worth every risk.